Welcome to Secrets of the Art Business podcast. Practical tools, insightful conversation for the curious art professionals. I'm Daniela Duppen, your host for Season 1. I'm the founder of the Blonder Dealer blog and also an art professional for the past 15 years. I met some really interesting artists, curators, collectors, and professionals that I hope will give you some great insights into the art business. And why not? We're gonna find some great secrets. So join us for the conversation and for this incredible journey. Welcome to episode 7 of Secrets of the Art Business podcast. Today in the studio, we have the artist, Vic Mihatovic. I hope I said it right.
You did.
Yes,
Thank you.
Great. So Vic, thank you so much for coming here in London for the podcast. I know you come from Margate, from where your studio is now. And I wanted to invite you as the first artist actually on the podcast. I'm really, really honored to have you here. We connected actually online with the Avita networking of women in the arts, which is great. And I was impressed by your attitude as an artist and your work because, I meet several artists, but of course, some of them, they take, a more of a different approach, active approach, and some of them more passive, and you're definitely on the active side. So you were born in Sweden.
Yeah.
You have a very interesting background, but you lived most of your life in the United States. Now you live in London, and you are of Polish Croatian nationalities. So you have a really interesting mix, I have to say. Quite interesting background. And you moved to London to study here. To do your MFA, I guess. And your work deals with different mediums. You deal with sculpture, paintings, so you're multidisciplinary approach. And you have a very interesting philosophy behind your work, which you will explain. I won't explain that for you. And you have exhibited in the UK and United States. But your work is also in collections worldwide, from Europe to UK and United States, from San Francisco to Los Angeles to London. And you created also public sculptures, mostly in the US because you need the space to create. In London, it's quite difficult. So long introduction to say that I really admire you coming here and sharing your thoughts as an artist today. And what I wanted to ask you is just tell us a bit more about your background and your path as an artist and what really brought you to London.
Wow, well, thank you for that introduction.
Long introduction.
That's great. I'm honestly just so excited to be here. It's really quite lovely. And thank you for asking me to be here. My path into fine art. As I came from an immigrant family, so as an immigrant, the path of fine art wasn't really an option for me. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I came to later in life. This is when I was living in Amsterdam, and I had been made redundant from the last financial crash that happened in about 2008 to 2010. And then I had the option of figuring out what I was doing, and I decided to go to art school.
Great.
and that's where the journey began. So I went back as a mature student.
Did you study finance before or management?
I did do some accounting in undergrad, the first 2 years of undergrad. Mm-hmm. I did accounting instead of taking statistics. Because I didn't want to take statistics. And I just got along with it really well. And I had been previously working as a horse trainer.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was basically finding that a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses didn't really take into account the financial aspects of how to keep their businesses healthy. I come from a line of really strong-minded female entrepreneurs. My mother is an entrepreneur. My grandmother is a self-made woman in Poland after the war. So I think I was raised with that mindset.
Yeah, that's great. And then when you had your first education in arts in the United States, and that's where you started creating also quite large-scale works, large-scale sculptures. I've seen pictures of it. I'll link your website so we can all go and have a look at your work in more detail. And then from that experience, you also had experience with placing your work in the public realm of sculptures outside and dealing with, bronze and challenging materials. And then you moved to London to create, to attend another art school, really important, the Royal College of Art, which is really prestigious, long-standing institution, really, in the UK. How did you find the sort of, different environment, moving from the US to the UK in terms of the arts?
Yeah, I think that the culture shock was definitely real.
Yeah.
The culture, especially California artists have a definite style, I think. A lot of American artists have the freedom of the land, essentially. I mean, the land art movement did come from you'd say California, Nevada back then. And so there's a different energy there, I think. Also, the modernism and abstract expressionism is kind of an American thing.
Yes, for sure.
And so it's deeply rooted there, and so there's a huge influence. I had a huge influence from that when I was in undergrad. And so coming to London, I think it opened my eyes up to maybe different options as well, but also I did feel a bit constricted and confined, to be sure, with the tight spaces here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you were used to create, big work with sculptures there, and also, if you think about abstract expressionism, I think about large canvases, big spaces where you can really interact with the colors and the space. And that's what comes into my mind, when I come to the US and I see the museums. They're huge, and the works is big, and I think maybe London is a bit more local and confined in that way.
Yeah,
but
maybe reserved as well.
Reserved as well.
I think reserved. Just the nature of, I think British culture tends to be a bit reserved.
Yeah.
So I think the art reflects that.
Yes. And then once you were part of the Royal College of Art, and you graduated there in 2019. And how did you find, so of course you came here, you had to build your network of people really in the arts from scratch.
Yeah.
So how did you find that happening while attending the RCA, and how that evolved?
Well, I feel like networking is hard work in general in any field that a person is in. There are certain ways that you have to, I think, behave, or not necessarily behave, but just in a way of keeping the connections going, I think takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Without trying to do it too hard, right? Or without not doing enough. But I find that the best way, amongst the many, we find the few, right? And
definitely.
So we'll meet a lot of people, but every once in a while you meet somebody that you click with or connect with and you have a commonality with. And I think that's the most important thing, is finding commonalities. My class at the RCA had 60 people in it. I maybe have connections with 5, right? That I still continue and chat on a regular basis with. So it's not that you're going to be, best mates with everybody, but I also have really good connections with people from my undergrad as well. Still. So I think it's just really important to, when you find the connection, is that you make the effort to keep it.
Yes, to nurture it.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. And so you came to the RCA with certain expectations in terms of artistically, but also maybe, potentially for your work, to sell your work. And what did you were faced with after the experience?
After graduation? Oh, well. That was interesting.
How do you think that artists, they approach the MFA as, one of the achievements? Of course, it's an achievement. It's huge.
And there's a massive come down, and I think nobody really talks about the come down after the MA.
Yeah.
Right? You've essentially spent 2 years of your life completely focusing on your work and being in this academic environment that's really intense.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a come down after that, whether it lasts 3 months, whether it lasts 6 months, or however long it takes, and everybody has their own different response to it. I think for me personally, it was a bit tricky because 2019 was graduation in midsummer. Then I personally had to have a surgery in October, November, while I was also looking for a job. So So there was the job hunt that happened immediately, the panic of okay, I have to stay in London. How am I going to do this?
Yes.
And so it was basically a serious job hunt. Then I had to have surgery. And then by January, I had the job. Surgery was done. Great success. But then it was already January 2020.
Right.
Right? And
then so the timing was crazy.
And then I had a huge show that I was a part of at Barge House at OXO Tower, and that was February. And so, you know, create, install, deinstall, lockdown.
Yes.
So, so it's been a bit, it's the momentum that everybody praises. There's a lot of pressure on keeping the momentum going after the MA. I also feel like that's...
Or even to succeed, like immediately after MA, it's not that your career automatically takes off as an artist just because you were in the MFA and you did this Master of Fine Art. And even though the institution is prestigious, and of course you make connections and you have the degree show, which you had in 2019 and everything. I think still it takes a lot of hard work and determination to then, succeed. You were talking to me, we talked before, and you said that the majority of artists that come out of an MFA actually then decide to then do something else because you have that expectation of like going there and succeeding immediately, or be like an overnight success, but that doesn't happen. Actually, it doesn't happen anywhere really. No. It's a lot of like time and hard work and building your network and your connections and finding a way as an artist, to find your path, your career really.
Well, it's that saying, there are no overnight successes.
Exactly.
Right? And I think the important thing is to figure out why you're creating and why you're making art. And the hard thing is, especially what I had to engage with, is this idea of, or separate myself from, is the idea that the constant affirmation that the critique or the school gives you or the academic environment gives you is that there's always feedback, whether you want it or not. For me, it was too much personally, right? But whether you, and then when you get out there, there's no feedback unless you create that environment to have that feedback. I personally have now moved into a live workspace to where I have quiet space and alone time because for me that works better than having a shared studio.
Right.
And I really value that time and that thinking space. Other people don't work like that. Other people need to have that constant energy fed to them with their work. So I think it's a matter of trying to figure out and learn about who you are as an artist. Once you're out of the MA, I don't necessarily know the MA can teach you that.
Right.
Right? Because the MA is so fast-paced and it's so intense.
Yeah.
That you're so busy learning about critical theory. I will say that's one amazing thing about the RCA is that the critical theory aspect of that school is phenomenal.
Do they teach you like then how to price your work or how to sell your, not to sell your work, but how to like create a sort of more environment of then potentially then sell your work afterwards or dealing with like galleries or collectors? Is it something that you learn from there or you have to like figure it out yourself?
I think there are maybe one or two. There's a really good program done by a woman named Hannah called Fuel RCA, and she's put together some workshops that happen maybe 1 or 2 months out of the year sporadically, that have guests come in to maybe have like, here's a seminar on networking. So there's one seminar on networking, here's a seminar on how to price your work, but that's also geared towards the ceramicist or the jewelry designers or people that actually have like token item. I don't mean token to diminish, diminish it.
It's more like an item.
Like an item that you can sell, whereas fine art and selling or installation or sculpture becomes a whole different beast.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it's hard to, when you come out of an art school and you don't have that sort of facing the market really of what it is, it's really hard to price your work as an artist. And I get, asked that question sometimes as an art advisor. I mean, mostly would be like a dealer who would help maybe the artist to price the work. But many artists are still facing with the questions, how do you price your work? So what are your suggestions on that?
Well, I think as artists, we all want to price our work a very significant amount because we spend so much time and effort on it. But I think it's good to compare what other people are selling their work at that have the same experience, perhaps, same CV, I would say. Maybe the same type of work, same genre, as a good comparison tool to figure out where to start from. And then, of course, it's everybody's personal decision. But I also want to make the point that there are many different markets to choose from, and the price of the work depends so much on who you're selling it to.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I sell my work, let's say at a community garden donation sale or something, that price range is probably going to be 25 to maybe 100 at most, right? Or if you take the work and sell it in Mayfair, you know, that's not going to go under 1,000 by any chance. And so it just depends on who your market is. And I think the main thing to really get across for artists is that there's almost 8 billion people on the planet.
Yes.
I think maybe 4 of them will buy your work. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, it's the same with like, exactly. So
somebody out there will buy your work.
Yes.
You just have to find them.
Yes. Or they'll find you somehow.
Yeah.
And so I really like your approach, which is, you know, very straight to the point and very like proactive as well, in a way also on the financial side, because you are also working as a finance manager part-time for a group of artists called Random International, who is really well known. They've done great installations at the Barbican or you know, at the MoMA New York and many other institutions and museums all around the world. It's a really creative, you know, group. And but you manage their finances, which is so fascinating. And so what are your tips for artists to get out of the mentality of the starving artists and really to get out there and really understand more about, you know, their potential from that point of view?
I think everybody's, well, the myth of the starving artist is a myth that I think is impressed upon us to be desperate to sell our works for people that are trying to make money on it.
Yeah.
To be honest. I feel people need to figure out what their psychology with money is. The trope of the starving artist, the idea of the artist being anti-capitalist and therefore has to shun money in and of itself. And I think that's commendable. I did it for the first half of my life. You know?
But then there's a shift. There's a change of mindset.
You get tired of being broke.
Yeah.
To be fair, you get tired of being broke, and you realize that, you know, the ideologies don't necessarily stand up to trying to survive in the world that we are in right now. And I'm not saying it's right or correct, but we're in peak capitalism right now, and we have to pay rent and we have to eat.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's any shame in the artist trying to learn business skills. Business is business across the board, no matter what niche you're in, within fine art, within, you know, the horse industry, within, you know, the stock market. It has basic tenets that I think everybody needs to study and learn, even if it's just a basic budget or learning how just because you get money in doesn't mean that that's all there's to spend. There's relationships with galleries that have to be upheld.
Yes.
And so I think it's a learning curve. There's a huge learning curve. I do wish they would teach a lot more practical business experience within art schools.
Yes.
But then also I'm not sure if anybody would show up to those classes either because they find it boring or they glaze over or they've never been introduced to that kind of topic in their life.
Yeah, I mean there are lots of now professional resources online for artists that I think if you want to learn, if you have the curiosity to learn, then it's possible to do it. Maybe the role of the art school, it isn't to provide that education as well. Maybe it is to direct the artist towards, you know, if you want to know more, then you can, you know, basically learn.
That's a valid point. I mean, it's true that the art school for the MA or the MFA for the artist is not necessarily geared to the business aspect. It's not an arts administration course. Exactly. Right? So that's a very valid point.
But definitely, I think it is from the initiative, like you did for yourself, of the person, the artist, to then, you know, before you go into maybe a contract with a gallery or showing your work, to then understand those principles and tools that really at the end benefit your career, because then, you know, if there's any contract that has issues, then you have to address that and you have to learn that. Otherwise, you know, you learn by mistakes.
If you're lucky enough to get a contract,
Yeah, exactly. If you're lucky enough. So then maybe learn how to get there first before worrying about.
Well, I just mean that contracts aren't usually a thing that has been standardized within the fine art world, from my experience. There are contracts made for specific projects. Let's say if here we're going to go to this particular event, and this involves this exchange of money for this particular work. There's that contract. Like the contract that I got for the public art piece that I did in California for the Lagunitas Brewery. had to request a contract, and then I had to write it up. Luckily, I had a friend of mine who's an attorney, and I was like, "Can you just look over it?" She's like, "Well, I'm not a contract attorney, but okay, I'll look at it."
Yeah, always get someone else's opinion.
But I feel like don't be scared to ask people for help. And,
Definitely.
And I think to go back to the networking thing, I think the best way to network and keep relationships is to not be afraid to ask for help, but also don't be shy about offering help, because everybody has their own skill set.
Definitely.
And I think we can all work together to kind of create a better art world, for all of us.
For sure.
If we all share these skill sets rather than trying to be competitive about them, or to try to believe in this idea of scarcity, right? Where if this artist gets, a lot of that I found that, like in the degree show, there was so much competition for space and where it's like
Visibility.
Visibility.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing is that that's. If you work, it'll come. I also think that people need to look at how actors and actresses that they see over the years go in and out of films, and I think about that as how we go in and out of galleries or go in and out of shows or high-profile events. Everything changes, and so what has to stay consistent is why you're doing the work.
Yeah, that philosophy and your core values, they have to stay with you the whole way. That brings me to the final questions for today's episode, which is, what is your secret, if you have one, of the art business?
So many secrets. Which one? I think the main secret is that everybody's doing the best that they can, and don't assume that you don't know anything because you think someone next to you knows more than you do. Basically, and get out of your own way. I think especially with women, we are taught to not take up space. I think and as artists, we tend to be insecure because our work is so close to us.
Yeah.
I think just get out of your own way and believe in what you're doing. And yeah, I think that's the secret. Just believe in what you're doing.
Yes, we definitely have to get that as a reminder, like continuously.
I have to remind myself every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
For sure. Yeah. We all need that reminder.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Vic, for coming here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and this is the end of episode 7 of Secrets of the Art Business. So thanks so much for listening and tuning in. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify podcast, not Apple, Amazon Music and Podbean, and also on the Artfix YMX radio. Thank you so much.